Welcome to the very first episode of the May Queens podcast. I am Mary Graves.
And I'm Heather of Heather Loves Horror.
And we are the May Queens. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Can't complain.
Cool. I gotta say, the reason why, first of all, we chose this name because we had a list that was created of possible names, and we had our friends and fans, whatever, followers on Instagram kind of vote, and this was the winner. But also the reason why this name ended up on the list at all is because I was following you on Instagram, and one of my first interaction, or one of my first seeings, I can't think of words today. That's great to start off a podcast when you can't think of words. One of the first things I saw of you was your filth for Midsommar, and it just felt so you, with the flower crown and talking about Pele. I've watched this movie like 4 times now, and I'm still not sure how to pronounce his name. I want to say it's Pele or Pella.
I think it might be Pella, but I want to say Pele every time. And then at another point, I felt like they said just Pel, and I'm like, so what is it? But anyway, I feel like cool.
Right. Yeah, I know. Because I think the Americans in Midsommar call him Pella or Pele, but the Swedish people call him Pela. So I think it just depends on your accent which one's correct. I'm gonna call him Pella because I think that's the appropriate Swedish way to call him. Yeah. So you already have your show, Heather Loves Horror, and I've got my Terror Tuesdays thing, but I figured that we could combine our forces and just talk about horror movies. With your podcast, you're talking to people in the horror community, and I think that's amazing. But I also think we could dive deeper into movies, just any movie and movie topics on the show, and that's what the show is going to be. So what are your thoughts?
I love that. No, I'm completely down for that. I would love to do that. I would have loved to have done that on mine also, but it's kind of boring just watching one person do it. So I figured I'd limit those episodes and just do those when I have nothing else. But it's way more fun talking to someone else about it. It's just, so I love the idea.
Absolutely. Okay, so today for our first episode, because my first experience getting to know you was through Midsommar, and one of my favorite horror movies of the last couple of years is Midsommar, I figured that we would talk about Ari Aster. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And start off with Midsommar, because it is his last movie he's made so far, and hopefully there are more in the works, but I can't seem to find anything about future projects. But that could be, because we're living in times of COVID, so people aren't really planning for the future right now. So what are your initial thoughts about Midsommar as a whole?
Let's see. I was very drawn to it because Dani she's introduced to us as a sad girl who just feels kind of like, my perception of her was that she was kind of lost and a little bit broken, and she had just been searching for something to complete her and to fill that void. And she's got this boyfriend Christian, and rather than her being his girlfriend and his companion and loved one, she's more of a burden to him. And I kind of found that to be relatable. Just like how you feel about yourself as an individual. You see yourself differently than others, and I feel like my own problems are a burden to anyone. So like I find myself not wanting to share, and then when I do, I feel like I've overdone it. And then like she says, she feels like she leans on him too much. And then the whole Pele coming in and remembering like certain things about her, like her birthday when her own boyfriend forgot, and asking her if she had ever, I believe it was, had she ever felt loved or had she ever felt held? And you can just tell that she hadn't felt that. And so I kind of felt a very strong bond between her character and how I feel as an individual, because I'm kind of a cynic. Like I'm not really into the idea of love. Like I don't know that I believe it. But then watching her like come and grow with these people, and just watching her relationship kind of develop or kind of like progress with Pele. Kind of gives you a little hope. And then, the ending's just glorious. So what about you? What did you think?
Totally the same, where she's definitely a broken character from the start. And it doesn't help that her boyfriend like manipulates her into staying in this relationship because he's avoiding, who is the other guy who's basically the reason they're going to Sweden, because he's working on his thesis and his dissertation. And the others, well, okay, Mark is there to sleep around with all the Swedish women he can. And Josh is there for his work. Christian is also there to sleep around, but he didn't expect Danny to show up with him. But tragic events at the beginning of the movie. Spoiler alert, because we will definitely be talking about things that, probably should have said that at the beginning. We'll be talking about things that will probably spoil the movie. But you have Mark and probably there to sleep too, but Danny ends up tagging along. And he's holding on to her for his own benefit and for his own distraction, but he's treating her like complete crap. There's like in the beginning when she finds out that he's going on this trip, and he's leaving in 2 weeks for the trip that they've been planning for months, and she just finds out about it. And he twists it in a way where she ends up apologizing to him. Pissed me off so much, because I've definitely had, not relationships, but friendship where things have been twisted around, and I end up apologizing for things that I should never have to apologize for. Then, you start getting some self-respect and diving into your own personal life, and hopefully you figure out those things over time, and you learn to see those red flags before they get to that point. But Danny is definitely a broken character, and I've watched this movie probably at least 4 times. I've gone through this whole cycle of emotions, and I watched it for the 4th or 5th time last night. And I have a new emotion now, because I think I figured something out that I didn't see before. When I first watched this movie, I thought, wow, this is messed up, but good for Danny. And the second and third time I watched it, I was still kind of in that, this is a great breakup movie type thing that Ari Aster was going for. But upon this new viewing, and maybe it's because I sat down with a notebook and I took all these notes, and yes, I took a lot of notes, and I'll go through a couple of, there's definitely a list I want to go through in my notes. I feel anger, and no longer do I feel happy for Danny's situation at the end, and she found this home. But I think the thing about Ari's vision, and all, because he's very detail oriented in all of his movies, is that this is just another form of manipulation, like Christian was putting her through. This cult of Swedish people are also putting her through. So she hasn't had a full transformation and a full arc. She was drugged and tricked into people. Like, okay, Mark, nobody fucking cared about Mark. He peed on the ancient tree and he was a jackass. But he was also honest to Christian about letting Danny go. So I gotta give him a little bit of credit for at least trying to be a good friend, even for selfish reasons. Josh is the smartest character out of the bunch. And he's the most actual friend-like friend to Christian, where he calls him out. He's like, okay, well, are you throwing yourself into this relationship you don't even want to be in, because you also have a thesis to work on and you're not working on it, and you're trying to delay and procrastinate working on it. And I'll get more into Josh's character too, because there's other things I want to talk about him. I actually loved Josh, and I hate what happened to him, and I didn't feel that way until this last watch too. But then you have Danny's character and the setup with Pele. And here's what I had a thought when I was watching it this last time. Was he actually the one responsible for Danny's sister and her parents dying? And I Googled this after I had this thought. I'm not the only one who thinks this. One, you've got the tape around Danny's sister's mouth to force her to breathe in the fumes. So she could have done that herself, but the look on her face makes me think there was a struggle, and there could have been a psychological struggle where she decided she didn't want to kill herself, or she taped it on her face to make sure that she wouldn't turn around and stop the suicide, bringing the parents in. And then you're hearing from Pele that he lost his parents in a fire, that he lost his parents and he knows what she's going through, but that he was a little boy when it happened, supposedly. So was he indoctrinated into this cult because his parents were sacrificed in a fire like Danny's friends are at the end of Midsommar? Or were they killed in like a fire at home because somebody from the cult initiated him getting into the cult by killing off the connections he had in his regular world? And the fact that he's got such a strong Swedish accent kind of goes with the thought that he was indoctrinated as a younger kid. But he had his sights set on Danny from the beginning. He was already trying to break up Christian and her before the parents and the sister ever died, because he was talking about impregnating the Swedish ladies. And I don't know, I just feel like instead of her being manipulated by Christian into a relationship she didn't really want to stay in, or she shouldn't have wanted to stay in, she was manipulated by Pele to be in a cult that she also shouldn't want to be in. And part of me really wants there to be a sequel. Right. Because I want to see her either go through what Toni Collette goes through in Hereditary, which is a full-on self-destruction, but taking everybody else out with her, or exposing the cult somehow. Like a new group of people show up at Midsommar and she somehow uses them to destroy the cult. I don't know. But that made me so angry.
Yeah, he definitely manipulated her. That I don't know if you remember in my VILF, but I was like, Pele, you can manipulate me into joining any cult, because he was, and there's something foolish about me that, like, if I'm on guard, like, I know I'm being manipulated, but like still sometimes I'm just like, okay, go ahead, and I just feel like kind of as if she was just so down and so low that she probably had an indication that was going on, but she finally felt accepted, whereas with Christian it was always not just no acceptance at all. And so I feel like she welcomed the manipulation and joining the cult because it was the first time she felt alive and just a part of something. And I definitely wonder too if Pele did have something to do with that, the parents and the sister. I feel like originally I felt like she was saying, that the emo was different, meaning that she just had that gut feeling that something was wrong. But I didn't think of it like you did, and that could very well be right. And was Pele, were his parents burnt at the end of a previous ceremony? Like, how was that done? Like, did they go up in flames inside the temple? Were they sacrificed, like you said, to get him into it? Because it does seem like he kind of had been into it for a while. It wasn't something that was new to him. And so those are definitely great questions. I do know that Ari Aster was going through a breakup, and that's when he decided to write this movie. And so I was like, glad to hear you say that. And I was just like, God dang, like what? I've been through some shit. Why never use that to write a movie? Like, this is golden. So, but let's, anyway, so what were you going to say next?
The other reason, well, first of all, I want to know if Ari saw himself as Christian or if he saw himself as Danny.
Ooh, good question.
Relationship.
Very good question.
That'll give us some clues as a person. But you know what else makes me think that it was a manipulation from the entire start? The movie starts off with a tapestry that basically gives away the entire plot of the movie. And Ari does this where he likes to give away the obvious, but if you're not really paying attention, you're not going to know what's happening. And even if you know what's happening, still have something happen that you have no fucking clue is coming up, which he does that perfectly in Hereditary. But with Midsommar, I was looking at this tapestry and I actually paused the video. This is over a 2-hour movie and it took me 3 hours to get through last night because I kept pausing it and looking at everything and trying to get every single detail. And the tapestry at the beginning starts off with winter and you see see skeletons and death and two figures brought. We see throughout the movie there are different tapestries hung up in the cult grounds. I think they call the place Harga. So this is their traditions on these tapestries, which means it's a tradition that when they're getting to the May Queen crowning, there is supposed to be a huge death at the beginning, which means they are either expecting it and then fate just steps in, or more likely, because this isn't a magical cult. This isn't like Hereditary where it's a cult of witches. One, brilliant, and two, terrifying that people could do that. But man, that's how cults get started.
Totally. I like that you said that Hereditary is a cult of witches, because when someone told me that it wasn't witches, that they used the cult, but they didn't think that it was a witch aspect. That's when I was like, maybe I'm looking at this movie all wrong. Sorry to go back to that movie, and then it kind of like lost its luster to me, because I was like, so I'm wrong. But to me, it just has so many witch vibes that I was just like, I got in my head about it, and I was, so it fucked with me hardcore. Anyway.
I mean, you could say that technically both of the movies are technically witches. And you got Hereditary, which is like the magical, the evil dark side of witchcraft that deals with demons, and they're actually performing magics that actually work. They're contacting the dead and everything. But with Midsommar, it's more of like your Wicca type witchcraft, where it's just meditation and pageantry rituals, dressing up in costume. Those are all different aspects of different forms of paganism. Right. But with Hereditary, it's full on magical world, which we're gonna get there in a minute. But I do want to talk about Josh before we do. Okay. Because this is the obvious, but I also, I don't know. See, I didn't Google this one to see if people are talking about it, but I looked over the Midsommar cult in Harga very closely. I didn't see one Black person in that tribe, that family. So would they have ever accepted Josh? Like, they had the couple, Simon and Connie, who were people of color, and all three of them got sacrificed. I feel like this is a very racist cult that they were brought into. And I don't think Dani, if she, gets to a point, she's not going to be on anxiety medications, because they're not going to be able to pick them up in that area. I mean, they were watching Austin Powers at one point, which I thought that was funny, but they probably have some sort of electricity or battery power. I don't know how that works in that part of Sweden, but she's not going to be able to get her medications. So she's going to be clean off of those. And she's not going to be on the fancy tea her entire life. I assume she's not going to be drinking it her entire life. So she is going to be clean and clear-headed, and she's going to look around, and she's got to see that they are murdering people and that they are not including people of different races. I feel like she would have an issue with that. I would like to think that her character would have an issue with that. But there's definitely a racial aspect to, there was also something they said about the dark one. They were trying to, I know, because it's with Midsommar, it's summer versus winter, and the light conquers the dark. And then when winter comes, there's also rituals with the dark conquering the day. So every side gets its time. But I feel like with Midsommar, there was definitely a darkness gets vanquished feeling to it. And Josh's character was doomed from the start, and that sucks. I also feel like he's the only one who had a real reaction other than Dani to the old couple jumping off the big rocks, cliff diving into other rocks. And he went to write about his thesis afterwards, so he's doing his work. But I don't know. I felt really, really sad for that character.
Was he the one who made a big deal? I can't remember who it was, but one of the characters made a big deal about it being nighttime, but the sun was still out. And the reason why that I forgot about that, but you brought my attention back to it, talking about darkness and lightness. I can't remember if it was Josh or if it was Mark.
It was Mark. Because he kept saying, lie down, lie down. It feels so much better.
That's right. Yeah, he was, that's funny. But Josh was, I like Josh too, because he's the kind of friend that you want to have. You want to have someone call you out on your bullshit, and if you're doing wrong, like, them tell you. And like, even whenever Christian, it was kind of like finally deciding that his thesis was going to be on that, Josh is like, kind of like, what the fuck? Like, that I'm doing my thesis on this, like,
Yeah.
and Josh has been nothing but a good friend to him. So that was kind of messed up to go in and like take someone's idea from them and try and pass it off as your own, which worked out well for both of them,
You know what?
since they weren't allowed to do that, and nobody survives to be able to write the
Right.
thesis.
Oops. Okay, so where did I put it? I made a list, and it is 16 points long of all the atrocities that Christian makes in this movie. I just started listing them. Everything that makes Christian an asshole. Now, I want to know your opinion if these things are good enough to have him burned alive. Because I'm sure they are. I still kind of feel bad for Christian dying at the end, but I also I feel like he's a garbage human being, and we have a lot of reasons why he's a garbage human being. But maybe if he went through like therapy, or was completely like incelled and left alone and had no friends anymore, that he'd eventually come around to being a better person. Or maybe he'd turn into an actual incel and start, like, I don't know, shooting people or something. So here's the list. 1, he was hanging on to Danny for a year when he wanted to dump her for a year. Like, they were together for about 4 years, but he knew in that last year that he didn't want to be with her anymore. Mark calls him out on that. But so he was hanging on to her for an entire year. 2, he says, I love you. He definitely didn't mean it. And even 3, he didn't invite Danny to the party that they were having back at home. Not even, this was before the whole Sweden thing. But she wasn't even crying. She just wasn't sleeping. But, she already lost her parents and her sister. And we don't really have a great time, but I know they mentioned it was months between. And he didn't invite her to a party. He doesn't tell Danny about the Sweden trip. And he says he apologized, or he was trying to apologize. And Danny called him out on this, and I loved it, because he says, I'm sorry, but it's like with a question mark at the end, like, I'm sorry? Fucking pisses me off too. I would have called him out on it. But she's like, oh, it sounds like you're saying too bad. So, and then by the end of that, he threatens to leave, like just to leave the room and go home, which is to punish her, and he knows that. And it forces her to apologize for starting a fight, which needed to happen, and I wish she would have pushed past that. Lies to his friends about Danny coming to Sweden. So he's committing atrocities against his own group of guy friends. I mean, we'll get to the Josh thing in a minute. But he also says to them that he invited her, but she's not going. But she says she'll go, but she's not going. I'm like, oh, she's going. She's obviously going. And they all know that she's going, but he's still trying to bullshit them. He forgets about her birthday.
But then he tells them that it was,
to be fair, he tries
their
to,
idea.
yeah.
Oh,
But once he figures out that it is her birthday, he tries to make up for that with, a cake and a candle. And I thought that was actually kind of sweet, because, people forget, and you're in a place where you're taking all these drugs. So it can be really easy to forget dates and stuff. So I don't think that's a huge atrocity, but he did forget, and they were together for 4 years, so it's a dick move, but he did try to make up for it. Yeah.
I thought Pele had the cupcake or something. I remember it shit different.
I think he told Christian about her birthday. So he's the one who reminded him about the birthday happening. I think he got the cake from the cult, because where else would he get it from? And the candles and stuff. But the fact that he brought it to her and tried to, make her blow out her birthday candle and stuff, that was a sweet gesture. And I feel like at the beginning of a relationship where you didn't already have all these red flags, that would be a cute little thing to make a couple stay together for possibly longer than they should. But
yeah.
He did try to make up for it. Oh, when they're sitting on the ground and I see all the people dancing in line, and he gets kicked by the redhead, and Danny is obviously giving him a face like, don't go talk to her. He joins in the line dance and completely abandons her. Doesn't even invite her to dance. Like, he just leaves her there. Number 9. He did not celebrate their 4-year anniversary because she said it was 4 years they were together, about 2 weeks before she was talking to him about it.
Right.
So a 4-year anniversary?
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
he said they were together for a different amount of time, and she corrected him. I didn't realize that it had been so close to it happening, the anniversary of them being together.
Yeah. So they obviously didn't have a celebration, and okay, Danny could have brought it up because men, I guess the stereotype is that men forget. I know my dad never forgot my mom and his anniversary, so it's not a thing that always happens, but I know it can happen, and women forget too. But I don't know, she was keeping track, so she was just not on the same page as he was. Okay, leaves Danny alone after the sacrifice. Because you see those 2 old people jumping off the cliffs, and Josh goes to write about his thesis, and then he, instead of hanging out with Danny, who's clearly traumatized, she says, I don't even know if she says anything other than she doesn't want to be there. But instead of consoling her, because she just lost her own parents and her sister, but she already had so much death in her life. A good boyfriend would be there for his girlfriend who has trauma and PTSD probably, but instead goes to talk to Josh about stealing his thesis instead of consoling his girlfriend. Which that's my next thing on here, is that Christian tries to steal Josh's thesis. Let's see. Oh, he's not ashamed or shocked by the love spell under the bed. The redheaded Maire, I believe was her name. She does a few different things. One, there's the pubic hair in the pie, which he barely reacts to, but he does stop. I believe he stops eating the pie. But he drinks the drink that's a different color than everybody else's, because according to the tapestry, her period blood was in it. Gross, by the way. But he's still drinking it. And before that, she puts something under his bed, and he asks Oddfather, I believe, is the head guy there, about it, and he's like, oh, it's love, or maybe he's talking to Pele at this point. Tells him it's a love spell, and he's just like, oh, that's it. Like, he doesn't try to reassure Danny that nothing's going to happen, and he doesn't. The reaction's wrong. You could be flattered, but you could also be like, not into it, and make sure it stops right there. But no, he lets it keep going. Doesn't care about. He doesn't care about Simon and Connie, and thinks that he does. Like a few different moments throughout the movie. First, Danny is really concerned that Simon left without Connie, and she goes to tell Christian while Christian is talking to. I believe this is when he's actually talking to Oddfather, and he's trying to talk about the things that are going on around the I don't want to keep calling them a cult because he doesn't know they're a cult at this point. The commune. And he talks to Danny, like, with Oddfather standing there like, oh no, that's awful, blah, blah, blah. And then he turns back to Oddfather and goes, what about couples in the commune? How do you guys avoid, I don't know if that's when the incest talk was being brought up, but it's just he doesn't care about the things that Danny cares about, that he should actually be really concerned about, which is what makes it so easy for the commune to manipulate him into the situation he gets into. Oh, and then Danny says, and I love this, that she actually called him out on it, when they're sitting at the table waiting to eat their meal, and she goes, I could see you doing that. And there's no no apologizing for saying that to Christian, and Christian is obviously like, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? She's like, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good step. You should push it further and make him feel like the ass that he is. But that's a good step for standing up for yourself. Doesn't care about Josh being missing, and he disowns him when the book goes missing. He says, we do not associate with him as his friends or his family. It was like, yeah, okay, we know you didn't take the book. We know Josh is dead, and we know you don't know Josh is dead. But, dude, what a dick move. Never take him international. If you get abducted, he will not help somebody find you. He will just abandon you in whatever country you've been taken from. So there's that. Okay. When Danny is participating in the May Queen celebration, and she's top 8, and then she wins. People are putting the crown on her. For most of that, Christian is not under the influence of anything. He's towards the end, like right before she wins, he drinks the magic tea, and then he's a little out of his gourd, but for the most part he's clean, and she's doing this ritual dance and she's kicking everyone's ass, and she looks to him a few different times and he has no reaction. Everybody else is participating, having fun, really excited that she's still in it. Obviously, this is part of their manipulation tactic, but he shows no enthusiasm for anything she does while she's there. And he's just not a supportive person. So that just leads to Dani's emptiness and loneliness, which makes her easily manipulated by the cult. And then finally, he has sex with the redhead. So that's the end of my list. It's a lot. He's a garbage person. Do you think he deserved to be burned alive in the bear?
Well, probably not. But as a woman who has felt let down, not only by men, but like any kind of relationship in life, you're let down by your friends and peers. I kind of felt like he was. I was happy to see him go because he just
Same.
The only reason why he stayed with her was because he couldn't be the asshole boyfriend to leave his girlfriend after her family's gone, and then he never really asked her how she feels. If he does, I feel like it's not sincere, it's always more about him and what he can do to, let's say, get further in life, but he doesn't really get any further in life. I enjoyed seeing, yes, he just pushed his own friend Josh out of the way with the thesis, he's just not good people. Whenever the old couple is jumping off with a thing, she has a flashback of a PTSD flashback of her sister and her parents, imagining how it went down, playing out in her head. And like you said, instead of him comforting her, he goes to talk to Josh, right, about the thesis. And it's just
yep.
You can't expect someone in just a matter of months to get over something so traumatic. Even whenever I've grieved, it'd be like a year or more before I was at peace with my emotions or could cope with them. And she can find no solace in him. And he knows what's going on. He kind of figures out what's going on with the redhead, and instead of trying to avoid her, which yes, there are drugs around, yes, there are spells and rituals going on, but he does nothing to assure Dani that it will be okay. He does nothing to prevent it from getting any further. He just does not care. So maybe he didn't deserve to go up in flames, but it was very satisfying to watch. What are your thoughts?
I will say I agree. I definitely agree. Where I think that if there wasn't the manipulation aspect by the cult, then maybe we could have gotten an ending where he doesn't burn up in a bear suit, but it was really satisfying to see him go just because of everything that led to that moment. It's the ultimate breakup, but if there are people in your life who do these things, just break the fuck up with them. Don't burn them alive. Let's try to be a civilized society, I guess. Yeah. But definitely a satisfying ending. All right, I think we can move on to Hereditary. What are your thoughts on Ari Aster's first, as far as I can see from IMDb.com, his very first full-length feature movie?
I thought it was great. It's definitely both his films are thought-provoking, like anything else, I thought it's really great. I thought he had a great cast. It kind of leaves me a little bit speechless, thinking about the whole thing. I don't really know how to put my words into thoughts right now. I thought it was well done. It was very well done. I don't see how he could even come up with a concept where even with just the whole Charlie thing, and then being there one day, then not there, and then kabam, boom, there she is again. That was something that I just sat on for a bit, and I was like, whoa, But I thought it was great. What about you?
I will say this, because this was only my second time watching it. When I watched it for this podcast, I had seen it the first time I watched it. It was during the day. I was home alone though, but it during the day. And the second time I was just last night, which by the way, when you're watching back to back those movies, you need a chaser in the middle. Like I watched Bob's Burgers, I think, or some sort of cartoon. I needed something funny to cleanse my palate. Because these movies are really intense. But after watching Hereditary the second time through, I actually liked it better than Midsommar, which I was shocked about because I love Midsommar so much. But Hereditary, it just feels like, and you think because he's leaning into some of the horror tropes, there's a couple of jump scares, especially towards the end. I'd seen this before, and I still I had a little moment when I was watching it. Toni Collette appearing in the shadows in the corner when you just saw her on the roof or ceiling scared the shit out of me. And it was nighttime when I was watching it, so there was that aspect to it too. The first time I watched Hereditary, I thought that the last 5 minutes or last 3 minutes spoiled it for me. Like I thought that the storyline was so obvious. I was picking up on the things that Ari was throwing out throughout the movie, and then I caught on that Joan knew Annie, Toni Collette's character. I knew her mom before, and all of that. And then they had the little ritual in the treehouse, and I thought, okay, they didn't really need to have this entire ritual. They probably could have stopped it with him being crowned and then saying "Hail Paimon." But rewatching it, and then you see the decapitated bodies turn to bow to him when he has the crown on. I thought, oh, that's actually a brilliant touch that I missed the first time I watched it. I didn't realize they had turned. And then I realized that Joan, called the demon in Peter Charlie. And I thought, oh, Paimon left Charlie's body, but Charlie was still with Paimon, which means that whatever the grandmother did to Charlie as a baby did that body and soul into the demon. And it was not just about getting the demon out of her body, but his essence was tied to hers and was put in his body. So Charlie was still alive. And that makes the whole scene with Toni Collette or Annie talking to Charlie in the afterlife even more of a huge manipulation, because Charlie was the demon the entire time. She was tied to the demon, and now she's in Peter's body. And so now that I picked up on that in the second watching, I appreciate it so much more. And then on top of that, the scares and Toni Collette's acting is just phenomenal. She should have won an Oscar for that. I don't understand why the Academy doesn't appreciate horror the way they should. Oh, so good. I got goosebumps just thinking about it. And it was funny too, because I was watching this last night, and my dad walked in at the beginning, and he's not a fan of horror movies, but I made him watch a couple, like Bone Tomahawk, which, it's a Western. And he loves Western movies. So I thought this is a perfect gateway horror movie for him. But I kept warning him. I'm like, it's going to get really messed up. This movie's really messed up. Like he walked out before the Charlie scene, but part of me was really hoping he'd walk back into the room and accidentally see it just for the shock factor. That would make me laugh. Watch that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I noticed, again, watching these movies back to back, they're almost the same movie, but with a different plot. Ari has he's got his movies mapped out. You start off with a family or a broken situation, broken relationships. Even Annie's character is broken with Steven's character. I noticed that Steven, he's very supportive of Peter. And we know that, Annie was a sleepwalker, and she almost lit Charlie and Peter on fire and doused them in paint thinner. So I can kind of understand why Stephen would be really cautious about Annie being around the children. And we know that Annie had a brother who committed suicide and a father who died of starvation. So he basically committed suicide, which all probably is related to the witches. And then the grandmother died having a dissociative identity disorder. It was all about them thinking there are more people being put into them, which probably deals with Paimon, the demon, trying to be put into these people and ended up in their deaths. But when things start going down, Stephen doesn't believe Annie at all, even though Annie has all of this proof. There's a dead body in their attic, and instead of thinking, who the hell would put a dead body in the attic? He automatically blames her, which he thinks that when she was going to the movies, when she was really going to a support group, that she was going to dig up her mom. And it's like she went more than once, first of all. And second of all, the times are spread out. Was she digging up her mom in stages? Like, how did his reactions to everything were so unsupportive. And I wonder if he was the one that threw the notebook in the fire, if he would have still caught on fire. Or if it depends on the person throwing the notebook in the fire and the intention behind it. Like, would Annie have caught on fire like she wanted to? Would it have all ended? If he had believed her and she had that support, would this cult, like the cult in Midsommar, be able to manipulate this family? Because they would have been a stronger unit together. It's just, and Peter, God, she's like, okay. So I mentioned that if there was a sequel to Midsommar, I would want to see Danny's character go through what Toni Collette's character went through. Which, by the way, Danny and Annie, come on, those names are so very similar to begin with. I think that Danny, yeah, it took rewatching this to back to back to put that together. But Danny is hiding all of her emotions, and Toni Collette has that breakthrough, that amazingly honest breakthrough at the dinner table, where she's yelling at Peter about how if he would just apologize for killing Charlie, basically accidental manslaughter, but it is his fault. He was high. He was with her to prevent him from doing substances, and he did them anyway. And then he didn't watch her, and she ate something with nuts in it, and the whole thing went wrong. But he is responsible. I know that Annie's character takes some of the blame because she forced Charlie to go, but she did it to make Peter a better person, and he failed. So it's ultimately his fault. But that whole scene where she yells at him that she can't forgive him because he won't ask for the forgiveness, and there's no way that she can reconcile in her brain the awfulness of the situation until he admits to his part in it, so that they can move on and regroup as a family of 3 instead of 4 and deal with the loss. And I know people, especially religious types, like to talk about, forgive. You just have to forgive. It doesn't matter about the other person. You have to forgive. No. I personally feel like if you forgive somebody and they're not actually sorry for it, that's just allowing them to continue to make the same mistakes.
It's enabling.
And I think that yes, exactly, enabling them. I feel like the breakdown that Annie has at the dinner table is what Danny needed to have with Christian, to put him in his place and maybe even to break up with him. And I think that if there was a sequel to Midsommar, we could see Danny having that kind of breakdown with Pelle or anybody or the entire cult of Swedish people. And finding her way out of the group and becoming her own independent person who might actually be able to survive. Or she'll go too far like Annie did, and she'll go completely crazy and end up being sacrificed as a volunteer like Ingmar was, Pelle's brother. So I feel like there's so much more to Danny's story that we could see if there was a sequel. And I don't know if Ari's the kind of person who does sequels. But yeah, what do you think about Toni Collette in this movie?
Oh, she was amazing. You could I prefer Midsommar. I love that movie, but the intensity of Hereditary was so much more to me. I don't know if it's because I'm a mother, but just every bit of emotion that she was going through, I'm like, you feel it inside of you. And I'm with you. I feel like she did deserve the apology from Peter, bringing, for everything that happened. But at the same time, as a mom, I wonder if part of her struggle, I wonder what kind of struggle she felt as saying, no, she's going with you, because if I had, say, my son was going somewhere and I'm like, oh, you're bringing your sister. And then he came back and she was like, she was gone, I'd be pissed at my son, but at the same time, I wouldn't be able to forgive my own self. But I mean, she was unbelievable. Just every time she showed her emotion, it was just so raw and intense. And just talking about it, I can feel it, you know. And I too agree. She should have won an Oscar for that, like something. I don't get why she was snubbed, but you know, like unfortunately that's how it works. But I mean, it's like I don't know how I would be able to portray on screen the betrayal that I felt by my own mother, trying to put this demon inside of, not, you know, of inside of, I believe the cause of her brother's death was because her mom had put Payman, whatever his name is, into his body. I think that's why he had passed. So like maybe she figured that out, and then she's realizing that that's why she wanted to take care of Charlie, but he couldn't stay in her forever because she wasn't a male. And so then Peter gets it, and it's just like, how do you convey that type of emotion? And she just seemed to like nail every single bit of it. Like, yeah.
And
I don't know if I got my point across,
it's a total betrayal. Oh yeah. But Annie gets a total betrayal from like all sides too. Annie, like Danny, is standing on her own in the end because she doesn't have the support from her husband. She has her son who mentions that, oh, you made Charlie go with me to the party. You know, what about you? What do you need to apologize for, Mom? I thought that was such a dick move. I mean, you are the direct cause of her death. Even if that, you know, if she hadn't done that, maybe Charlie would still be alive. True. But it's like you didn't have to do these things either, and you did them, and she's dead directly because of you. Your mom is an indirect result, okay, but she can't deal with that until you deal with yours. So he was definitely not supporting her, although he almost died because of his mom. So I also kind of get all the subs. I feel like thinner. My mom was standing there with a match. I would probably not like my mom very much either. So I feel sorry for Peter after finding that out. But I feel like since it had been years since that had happened, and she, until like towards the end of this movie, hadn't been sleepwalking anymore, that they should have gone to therapy and been able to reconcile that. But there's no support within this family, and Annie needs it the most because she had the traumatized childhood too with her mom, had the trauma with her mom trying to raise Charlie. She made a doll of her mom trying to breastfeed Charlie. I thought that's so weird. And also, can you still produce milk if you're not pregnant? I don't think boobs work that way, so that's a little weird. But there's that. I guess maybe if you're magical, you can. There's that. There's the husband not supporting her because he thinks that she's going to go crazy and off the deep end anyway, apparently. And then you've got this cult of witches who are scheming against you, including Joan, who you thought was your only friend in all of this. It's just very tragic. Oh, okay. Here is another similarity between Midsommar and Hereditary, with Ari loving to throw things out that are hints as to what the story is going to be about. With Midsommar, it was the tapestries and the paintings on the walls and some of the huts, where you got to see the bear on fire, and you got to see, you know, winter through the May Queen crowning. At the very beginning. With Hereditary, it's the classroom scenes, because if you listen to what the teacher is saying, one of the first classroom scenes you have with Peter in the classroom talks about a character. I can't remember what the characters are because there's some Greek mythology thing. I think Greek. And he's talking about, is this character's story more tragic or less tragic if he doesn't have a choice? If he actually doesn't have a choice in what he does. And then the students are, you know, debating that it's more tragic if he doesn't have a choice because this character is just a pawn. Well, that was the whole family. Everything was manipulated. Nobody really had a choice. I don't know if that makes it more or less tragic, because I feel like if you have a choice and you choose the wrong choice, that's on you. And so we should all be more upset with you and your character is more hated. And then if you don't have a choice and the wrong thing happens, you at least get to put the blame on somebody else. Like Peter would be a worse character and a worse person if Charlie's death wasn't because the Coven of Witches had manipulated everything. You had the Paimon symbol, Paimon, calling him Paimon symbol on the the telephone pole that Charlie whacks her head against. And so that was a setup from the beginning for Charlie to get decapitated, which, by the way, awesomely awful death. But knowing that that was set up the entire time gives that sympathy to Peter's character. Is it awful because there was no way he was going to get out of anything that was happening? Yeah. But when you break down the character development in the movie, he gets a bit of an empathy and a sympathy from the audience, knowing that there was nothing he could do. So I don't know if not having a choice made it a more tragic story or made it a more relatable story in some ways. So what are your thoughts on choice?
Oh, I agree. I feel like if they would have had the ability to make their own choices and that everything wasn't kind of like more or less mapped out for them, that it would have, like, everything that would have happened would have been more like, well, damn, you caused it, you know. But knowing that they really had no say so in anything, or no matter, it pretty much seems like they were doomed, you know, from the beginning, that whatever choices they made, their fate was already decided. So that definitely makes it like you can't help but have compassion for something like that, because it's like they could do nothing right, you know, like everything's going to be wrong. So I feel the same way in that aspect. Definitely. I did want to ask you, what did you think about the link with the miniature dollhouse? You know, her mother's always working on it. What did you think about it?
The dollhouses were, one, incredibly creepy. I do not think I would want a room that was filled with them. I think that artistically, Ari is a little bit like Kubrick, where it's very artsy. He's got horror, but he draws it out. He makes you pay attention to all the details, and it's a great transition going from the dollhouse. Like at the very beginning, you see a room that's Peter's room of a dollhouse, and then they zoom in, and then somebody walks in the room, and it's a live scene. And the way the camera scans from room to room on the first floor, and I remember at least one scene, it looks like they're zooming or they're panning through a dollhouse, because you see more of the shape of the rooms than you probably would if you were just walking through the room. So you don't know if it's the actual house or the dollhouse. And I think in a way, the dollhouses are supposed to represent the manipulation of the whole situation. They're all just dolls being manipulated by this cult of witches.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought about that right now. I'm sure that was an obvious thing, but I just put that together now. And I got chills thinking about it. But that's brilliant. That's a brilliant way to convey manipulation without it being like a bad boyfriend or something. It's they're all dolls. There's nothing they can do. They don't have control over their own parts. Somebody else is moving you around. Oof, creepy.
Yeah, I love that concept. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say that I had read or had heard that he intended for the dollhouse to be kind of like its own character, like it was, which it's can't really be a character since it's an item, not a person, but you know, he definitely intended for it to make a huge impression on people. And like you, I believe that it was to show that everyone was just a doll or like a pawn in the game that was being played out. And that, I don't know why, but that was one of my favorite parts of the movie, was just like watching Annie like working on stuff for the dollhouses, and like, or for other people or whatever, and figuring out like if she was gonna add that to the dollhouse and like how that would play into the movie, like what was gonna happen next. And so I don't know why that just like really resonated with me over time, and I never really hear many people talk about it, so I was just always wondering why.
I definitely think it adds to the creep factor for sure. It gives that well, one, it keeps things dark, where, you know, Midsommar, you had the sun and horror is happening in the light, and that was a huge reason why Midsommar was so unique in itself, because people don't usually have horror movies set during the day. But with the dollhouses in Hereditary, and the house itself is dark, it's not lit, maybe the dollhouse is in that one room and the light's not on, so obviously it's going to be dark, so the transitions are really easy. When you see light, it's like for a blink, and then all of a sudden it's dark again. So I think having the little tiny houses be a part of or character in the movie adds to the atmosphere that the rest of the movie is set in, or the real world of the movie is set in. So I think that was a great choice. A great choice to take the usual in horror, which is having it set at night, and making it just a little bit unusual enough to be interesting.
What did you think about like the tree house? Because, that made a few appearances in the film itself. Opening scene as well. One of the opening scenes.
I wish that I had a treehouse like that when I was growing up, for one. Also, the shape of it, I mean, not just the cabin-ness of it, but it's the shape of a triangle. And we saw that in where the grandma was staying at the house before she had passed away. There was a triangle on the floor. And I can't remember where else, but triangles tend to show up throughout the movie. Like the rune glyphics, hieroglyphics, whatever. The rune stone symbols in Midsommar show up throughout the entire movie. Even when they're burning Christian in the hut, there's a shape of a rune stone in hay that gets lit on fire. So it's the little symbolism like that. That's a common thread with Ari in his movies. Granted, just these two huge movies. But when I'll talk briefly about the shorts, there are little aspects of what he did in these movies in those shorts as well. Like for one, with both Midsommar and Hereditary, it starts off, it takes a little bit of a build to get there, so it's not at the very beginning, but there's a shocking family death at the beginning of both of these movies. You got Charlie and the grandma. The grandma's not so shocking, but you got Charlie's death, and then you've got the parents and the sister's death in Midsommar. So he likes to be consistent in his blueprints.
Yeah, and then all the fire temple
at the end.
The hut from Midsommar is also triangular.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to ask about Hereditary before I move on to the shorts?
No, I'm ready to hear about the shorts.
Okay. Because I think that covers everything for me with Hereditary. Man, I love that movie. That was so good. With the shorts, okay, I need to break out my notes for this because there were a few of them. Most of them are under 15 minutes long. And as far as I know, this is all of the shorts that he has. And I believe they all came out before his first movie, Hereditary. But I don't know if the order I watched them in is the order that they came out, because there's a playlist on YouTube called Ari Aster Shorts, and I saved it to my YouTube channel, but the movies are pulled from different sources, so I don't know if they're put in order. There are two of them in particular, C'est la vie and the Basically. Basically and C'est la vie are both about one main character talking to the camera, so breaking the fourth wall. And C'est la vie is about a homeless person who is telling what he thinks about society and how he used to be an executive and he ended up falling from grace, and they tried to make him run for mayor, but then he was manipulated supposedly into stuff that he didn't want to do that ruined his career. And he ended up living on the streets. He had a wife and she dumped him and everything. And it's a very tragic story, but the way it's told is almost comedic, which I love that, because there's a tie to me with horror and comedy that just goes together. Like, I know there were a couple moments, in Hereditary, where you see Toni Collette look under the table when she's with Joan and Joan's talking to her grandson with the glass. You see Toni Collette look under the table. Then she does the same thing with her husband, Stephen, and Peter. And Stephen looks under the table to see if there's anything there moving the glass. I thought that was hilarious. And also made me understand them more as a couple, that there is a similarity there with their personalities. She's just marred by tragedy, and he's marred by being with her during the tragedy. So it ruins the relationship. But it's still pretty funny to see them acting like they're the same person like that. So there's a comedic element. But in the end, I don't want to spoil anything for you because I really want you to watch these. Don't watch them with your kids. They're not kid friendly, any of them. But it ends tragically. It just leaves you with a really sad feeling. And so does Basically. But Basically is the opposite, where you're following this rich woman, this girl. She's like maybe early 20s, I think. And she doesn't know better, but she probably should know better. but she's an aspiring actress whose mom was an actress and whose dad was a rich guy who owned a bunch of businesses and stuff and has Hollywood connections. And they're separated, so you never see the dad, but you sometimes see the mom, and you see her go through this very vapid existence. And she talks about a boyfriend that meant something to her but died tragically, and she's like, I dodged a bullet. And so she's an awful person, but you also see her story end tragically because they take acting and they compare it to being addicted to something. Like the homeless guy in the first one, he's shooting up in a tent at one point, talks about drugs. So they weren't back to back when I watched them. There was one movie in the middle, but they were the same person on like opposite ends of the so-called class spectrum. But you could see how a person with all the money and a person with no money are basically the exact same person, except that one gets to experience something else and the other person is experiencing something else. And obviously I feel more sorry for the homeless person because being homeless is awful and I hope I never have to go through that. But you weirdly feel sorry for the person who has everything supposedly, because she will probably be her own demise, and probably sooner than later. So those two are pretty tragic. And they deal with, there's actually a lot of, especially in the homeless person story, there's a lot of similar aspects where there's a great tragedy at the beginning of his story. He talks his parents being lit on fire. So you got the Midsommar thing going on right there. And it's just like how society manipulated both people too. So it's all about aspects of manipulation. Oh, there was something said in the first movie, C'est la vie, with the homeless person, that Freud, he says these words, Freud says that true horror is when the home becomes unhome-like. And I think that is what Ari based all of his movies on, the basic concept of home becoming unhome-like. Like Danny needed to get away from home. Her home was no longer her home. And so she found a new one. And in that was the horror. And then with Annie and Hereditary, her home was completely broken. I mean, her home wasn't home like when she brought her mom back into it. She kept her mom away when she had her first son, but she brings her mom back for Charlie, and then it sets off this domino effect of her home being completely damaged. And then comes the horror. The home is no longer a home for this homeless person. The home doesn't feel like home for this actress. So that, I think, is his basis for even these shorts. You'll see a lot of that. The Turtle's Head was the movie in the middle, and this is one you definitely don't want to watch with the kids. It has to do with a detective, and this is a comedy more than it is a horror. But the detective is a sleazeball. He's a complete disgusting person. Sexual acts are in this movie, not a lot, but he talks about them too, and it's gross. But the horror comes in that his penis starts shrinking. You don't really, do you see his penis in it? I think you do at one point see his penis, and apparently it shrinks inside of him, and it's the worst thing that's ever happened to him because he's such a sleazeball and he's all about getting laid. He takes on this client and all he can talk about is how much he wants to screw her. And it turns out that in the background, he's got like his detective friends working with him, like private detective, not a cop detective. And they find all this evidence that this woman's talking about that her husband has been murdered because of. And he has no interest in this like life-changing case because his penis is disappearing. And it ends sad, but it's like a tragedy of his own making. And it's like his version of home, what he's used to in his life, got taken away from him. So he has his own little horror story, which it's so funny the way it happens, but it's so gross too. And I couldn't help but laugh more than be horrified. But it does end on a very sad note. But it's really, really funny. That one I want to send to friends, but I'm like, I'm not 100% sure who I'd send that one to. The fourth one that I watched was The Trouble with Mom, also called Munchausen, which if you know Munchausen syndrome, I think by proxy. I don't know if by proxy is a different thing or not, but Munchausen in general is when somebody is faking sick. I think when you're the one faking sick by poisoning yourself, it's Munchausen. I think when somebody else is poisoning you to make you think you're sick when they're really just poisoning you slowly, that's Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And that is what is in this movie. Basically, a mom played by Bonnie Bedelia, who you may know from Die Hard. She was the wife, or she was the grandmother in the TV series Parenthood. She was married to the guy who's from Coach, who I can't think of his name. She's in this short, and her son goes off to college, and it's basically about her feeling lonely, having an unsupportive, unknowing husband, and her eventually starting to poison her son after he graduates from college already and gets married to try to keep him in her house. And I don't want to spoil how that one ends, but it also has a very sad ending. And it is, again, about the home not being home anymore. Because for her, when her son left, her only child, her home no longer felt like home. She keeps having flashbacks about when they would watch TV together or listen to music together. And so the horror comes when she tries to make her house her home again, but it never gets to be that way, and that's where the horror is. Let's see. We got a couple more. Oh, okay. Bo was interesting. Bo was about a guy who lived in an apartment where the apartment building was not exactly safe. He left his keys in his lock and left his traveling suitcase overhead down by his door. And he forgot something upstairs in his apartment. So he goes back upstairs, leaves everything unlocked and open, and somebody steals his key and his luggage. And so basically the entire movie is about him not feeling safe in his apartment. And it ends in a really weird way that I'm not 100% what the ending means. So I can't really speak to that ending anyways. But the aspect that this guy's home no longer feels home to him, and you see him like grow crazier. He at one point sleeps in front of the door to his apartment building with a bell hanging above it so he could hear the bell ring if somebody opens his door. And he has mouse traps set in front of the door, so if anybody walks in, they get hit with mouse traps. It's crazy. It's kind of funny, but it's also really sad. Yeah, it's insane. Okay, there's TDF, which I don't know. I don't think this fits with anything. This is the one thing, and it's like a 2-minute short that is pure comedy, and it doesn't fit at all with anything else Ari has done. But I think he did it for a different like comedy group, and he's in it actually, so you see his face in it. And TDF stands for Tino's Dick Farts. Yeah, basically it's a machine. They play it like like an infomercial, and what they do is it's a machine that you put on your penis. And this is where that's another overlapping thing with Ari. He likes to have really awkward nudity in like everything. So weird shaped penises. You got the cult witches in Hereditary. They're naked in the house, in the attic. They're naked in the treehouse. They're naked in the living room. You got that one guy who's just standing there smiling and his penis is out. And it's just creepy, beyond creepy. I mean, you got to be really comfortable with your body or with other people's bodies to be in these movies, I think. And then you got the scene where Christian is having sex with Maya, and he's surrounded by women of all shapes and sizes, completely nude, and all ages too. So I guess there's a body acceptance thing there, which is kind of nice. But also, I would not want to have sex like that with somebody pushing on my butt to get me to go. No. But that seems to be an overarching theme too that Ari includes in his movies. So TDF gives you a nice little visual. I think it wasn't an actual penis. It was like a fake cartoony penis, but you get to see the machine being used, and basically it's about getting a fart to come out of your dick instead of out of your butt, and how it's cooler. It's the weirdest thing I've ever watched. That is another one I think I have one friend I could probably share that with. Okay. The longest of the shorts was The Thing About the Johnsons. The full title. The Strange Thing About the Johnsons. This one's about 30 minutes long. So it's the longest of the bunch. And this one This one, I think you could really see Ari coming into his movie making prime. And it's the last one in the playlist. I wonder if it was the last one he made before Hereditary. And it's about this family, the Johnsons, who have a son who is grown up and gets married. And turns out that the father and the son are having a gay relationship. And finds out at this wedding because she sees the son going down on the father. And so it deals with the taboo of incest, as well as LGBTQ relationships, but it's about abuse. It's not about it actually being a relationship. It sounds like, because I couldn't really figure it out. The son is like, as an adult, forcing the father to do things, which is totally the opposite of what you would usually hear in these kind of situations. It would be the kid being forced to do stuff to the adult. And it sounds like the father may have started it when he was a kid, and the son wanted to turn it into something good, but the father was so ashamed that he didn't want to do it anymore, but the son is forcing him. So there's that whole broken home thing that comes with it again. And the fact that the mother finds out is where it gets even more tragic, and the father wants to tell the mother because he doesn't know, she already knows, and the son is married now to a woman, so home is broken and the wife's not sure what's going on. And it's the saddest out of all of the shorts. It's probably the most shocking out of all the shorts. And I mean, Turtlehead about the disappearing penis, that's pretty shocking. So it has to be a really shocking movie to overshock that. But you could really see Ari becoming the director he is through that movie. So I don't want to spoil the ending for that one. I think that's one that people should watch because it definitely has a message. It's definitely a message movie. It's just so weird to see how he began. You know, I'm starting to do mini movies of my done. Definitely not the same topics. There's not gonna be penises in my movies as far as I know. But to see the growth and to know what he's done professionally, it's inspiring and very interesting as well to see a person's movie personality coming out in everything he does.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to watch that at some point today. Watch those at some point today.
Well, I think that's it for our discussion today. Unless there's anything you'd like to add about anything that you've watched.
I can't think of anything. I feel like we covered everything, and I'm glad that you were able to tell about the Ari Aster short films too, to bring awareness to those. That's great. But yeah, I can't think of anything right now.
Well, you know, I went to IMDb, like the best website on the planet, because it has everything about movies. But I went to just to see what else he had done, if there were any other like full-length movies that we could add to the discussion. And I saw all of his shorts listed, and I thought, I didn't know they were shorts. I just wanted to find the movies, and then I found them on YouTube, and they're all there. And I thought, wow, this would be a great way to look at someone's beginnings. I mean, I know nothing about like how things were funded, what kind of equipment he used, and these are things I would like to know as a person making movies and shorts. But just knowing, like seeing somebody's origins and seeing what he started out as, and then seeing what he's become in terms of a movie maker is just amazing. You know, it like sets a blueprint for people. Like if you want to make horror movies of your own, YouTube is, and you know, other places you could post videos too, are a great place to start. Just start doing the short things, get noticed, get better, then get noticed, and you could be the next Ari Aster. So
yeah,
I like that.
I like that too.
All right, so a couple of announcements that I haven't told you about yet. I took out an email address for us, so if people want to contact us, they can email us at mayqueenspodcast@gmail.com. So we do have a Gmail account. I'll give you all the passwords and stuff later. But I took that out literally right before we started. We have an Instagram account now, which has nothing on it yet. which is the May Queens podcast, not there's no but at May Queens podcast. I figured we'll post on our individual accounts, but we could also post there. I took out a Twitter account for us, just in case, at May Queens podcast. I haven't taken out anything on Facebook yet, but probably by the time this airs, I will. We may eventually be on a stereo app. We'll figure that out at some point. And I think that's, there will be a YouTube page. I will take out a YouTube page so that we can post these videos directly to that instead. And I will also give you passwords for that too. So there are ways to contact us. And if you want to contact us individually, for me, it's Mary Graves, CLE. That's Maire Graves, CLE on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, but I'm mostly on Instagram and Twitter. And YouTube. I have my own YouTube videos. I doubled my subscribers from like 20 something to 54 now. So I'm very happy about that. And my next Graves Corner will be coming out this Thursday. It will be a blooper extravaganza because I've been wanting to do this video for months now. And this is the perfect time where I'm just going to film a little introduction. I don't have to do a lot of editing to that. And I can just look at every single blooper I've never posted from all the stuff I've done on Instagram. So that will be this week's video. What about you, Heather?
If you want to contact me, the best place is Instagram. Well, that's the easy. Hold on. Okay, so Instagram is Heather_loves_horror. But actually, to be honest, the best way to reach me would be on Twitter because I only have like a handful of followers on there, and my DMs only has a few messages, so it's not overwhelming. I think that's at Heather Beck BECKMYE 1, the number 1. But I mean, like all that stuff's linked in my Instagram on my all links or link tree. But for me, I'm working on stuff for the Heather Loves Horror podcast. I've got some people, I have another author that's going to come on, and then his special effects friend who is going to be on his upcoming novel. And then I got a couple indie horror movies coming where I'm going to be speaking with the director, which is exciting to me. I mean, I want to do it all, but just indie horror doesn't get enough attention, and then that's pretty much it. I don't really, that's about it. But
perfect. And don't forget to check out Terror Tuesdays on my Instagram account. I should probably talk about that since that's like my main thing I do on Instagram. It'll be on IGTV by the end of the day, before midnight usually. Where can they find the Heather Loves Horror podcast? Because I'm not I know I can find you on iTunes, but can they find you other places?
iTunes, Spotify. Let me look real quick. iTunes, Spotify, Radio Public, Overcast, Google Podcasts, Breaker, and Pocket Cast. And then, of course, Anchor. Anywhere on there.
Awesome. All right, great.
And it's Heather Loves Horror, no underscore in it. Oh, and it's Heather Loves Horror with no underscore. But yeah. So this was fun.
Yes, I can't wait to do the next one. We will, sometimes we'll be doing topics like this, and sometimes we'll just be doing just one movie for an entire podcast. I believe that's what next week's is going to be. So stay tuned, everybody.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for watching and listening.
We don't really have an official out yet, but yes, thank you guys for watching or listening wherever you're listening to us, and stay safe, and we will catch you next time.